What's going? Oh my
Hey,
God.
Chosen, y'all got an intro song?
Yeah, I got all of that. Okay,
Okay.
but oh, we're live. Um, what is this? Okay, guys, hold on.
Take your time. Take your time. We got good with it.
Okay.
All right.
Mm. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for tuning in to a FireTube TV Studios Ring of Fire Productions. In a world built on fragments of memory, where empires rise, fall, and vanish into dust, one question still burns. What really happens? What really happened in the age of kings? Welcome to the FireTube TV Studios, where truth is not given, it's forged. This is a Ring of Fire production, and tonight we welcome back Humble Mystic. He takes you deep into one of history's greatest mysteries, the collapse that shook the ancient world to its core, the fall of kingdoms, the silence of once great cities, the sudden end of an entire age. Historians call it the Bronze Age collapse. But was it only war? Famine and chaos? Or was something deeper at work? Could the answers already be written, hidden in the pages of the Bible? Ancient prophecy, divine judgment, or a story humanity misunderstood. Tonight, we don't just study history, we challenge it, we test it. We ask the questions others won't. Humble Mystic will be presenting us with the Bronze Age collapse. Is history snitching on the Bible? Does the Bible reveal the truth behind the collapse of an entire civilization? This is Humble Mystic. Welcome.
Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings, everybody. What up? What up, y'all? Good evening, family. I'm Humble Mystic coming to you from Titans Debate League. This is one of my first presentations over here on a big stage in the Ring of Fire. I'm so used to being, on our home planet, but this right here is an amazing opportunity, to get my face out there, to, work with my family over here. And I've been looking forward to this moment. Uh, Over at the Titan, right? We live for things like this. We live for deep dives, following the evidence, putting us on a hot seat, things of the nature. Tonight, we're going to go on a journey through 2,000 years of human civilization, the Bronze Age. Now, I know some of y'all might just be looking for me just to cover the collapse of the Bronze Age, but me personally, I don't think that's in depth enough, and I don't think that gives the full story. So tonight, family, I'm going to be covering the whole Bronze Age. So I'm going to be covering the Bronze Age in segments. The first segment, we're going to go back to the beginning, the early Bronze Age, roughly 33,000 to 2000 BCE, the birth of cities, inventions of writing, the first empires. Segment 2, we're going to go to the Middle Bronze Age from 2000 to 1500 BCE, the stage of Hammurabi, his law codes, the golden age of the Egyptian literature, things of that nature, the Hittites, the inventions of chariots and things of that nature. Segment 3, this is the climax, you know what I'm saying? The late Bronze Age, 1550 to 1200 BCE. To a lot of people, this is known as the golden age of interconnection. 6 great powers bound together. We're going to go through all of that. And the fourth segment is going to be where we pick up the pieces and we show the aftermath of the Bronze Age collapse, and a little bit of the Iron Age. Where my thingy at? Hold on a second. Oh, Cho, can you put my presentation on the screen for me? Do y'all not see it?
You said do what, sir?
Oh.
What you say, Humble?
You put the presentation up there on the screen for me?
Oh,
all right, there we go.
Is it on there?
Yep. Okay. So I went over the segments, segment 4, we doing the urban machine, the coals and the chariots. All right, so we're going to start at segment 1, early Bronze Age, 3300 to 2000 BCE, the full lecture, the full script. The Bronze Age is a network. All right, family, let's set the stage. I want you to think about a simple question. What does it mean when human beings learn to use alloy and copper and tin? What does it mean when they figure out that you can take these two metals, neither one of them is impressive on its own, and combine them into something harder, sharper, and more durable than either of them two by themselves? On the surface is metallurgy, it's technology, it's a step forward in tool making, and that's true. Bronze weapons are superior to stone weapons. Bronze tools last longer and holds an edge. But here's the thing, family, that most people miss. And it's the same thing that should stop you in your tracks when you cannot make bronze alone. Copper comes from one place. Tin come from another place. Let me turn my camera. I ain't no camera turn on. Tin come from another place, and those two places are often separated by thousands of miles. The copper might come from Cyprus, an island in the eastern Mediterranean, or from the mountain of Oman. The tin, the best evidence suggests it comes from the Bashkiran region of what is now known as northern Afghanistan. That's over 3,000 kilometers from the great city of Mesopotamia. 3,000 kilometers on foot, on a donkey's back, by river barge, through the mountain passes, through across the desert. Do you understand, family, what that means? It means that bronze is not just a metal. Bronze is a network. So hence, this is why we call this period the Bronze Age collapse. Because it's the metal became so superior during that time that it literally brought together infrastructures and networks of people who would have never and otherwise would have ever joined forces. This is what the Bronze Age is, family. Not just an era defined by a metal. It is an era where humanity first proved that it could organize itself across vast distances. And tonight, in this segment, we're going to watch the organization emerge from the first cities of southern Mesopotamia to the first empire, Sargon of Akkad. We're covering roughly 3300 to 2000 BCE. 1,300 years of human innovation, ambition, and ultimately catastrophe. So let's back up. Let's take a step and really go over this for a second. Okay. So the urban revolution, Ur, and Eridu. So picture this, family. Is roughly 3500 BCE, the landscape of southern Mesopotamia, what's now known as southern Iraq, is a flat upheaval plain carved by the Tigris and the Euphrates River. The soil is incredibly fertile, but rainfall is scarce. You cannot farm here without irrigation, and the single fact that environmental constraint changes everything because irrigation requires organization. You need canals, you need levees, you need somebody coordinating the labor for hundreds, eventually thousands of people. You need a central authority to say, this canal gets dug here. That field, that water, these days, these workers report at the dawn, and out of the organizational pressure, something unprecedented emerged in the city. A whole empire, right? So let's get over here. Sargon of Akkad achieved the impossible, unifying warring city-states into a single body. He was the architect of the first imperial myth. By creating a standing army and claiming divine kingship descended from the heavens, he transformed the city into an empire. Let's get into it, y'all. The climate, the smoking gun, right? So I was just over here talking about climate. And so we see from 3000 BCE to 2200 BCE, the climate, right, as far as the dust and the heat and things of that nature is starting to change. 2200 BCE, where we start to see the collapse, we start to see the biggest change of the climate. So what does that show us, family? It shows us that the Bronze Age wasn't just some utopia of people, right? Yes, everybody did trade, things of that nature, but ultimately the environment was causing problems. The political powers around the things was causing problems. And so this is what eventually led to the whole collapse of the age. So before we get to the total collapse of the whole age, right, let's get into the writings, right? The cuneiform and the temple economy. All right, family. So we've got cities. So we just went over the cities. We just went over Sargon. So we've got tens of thousands of people living together. We got temples accumulating grain, livestock, textiles, oils. Now we've got a problem. How do you keep track of this all? If you're a temple administrator in Uruk around 3200 BC and you've got a warehouse full of barley, flocks of sheep, teams of laborers, how do you know who delivered what, who's been paid, and who owes the temple, what's been distributed? Your memory isn't good enough. No one memory is, right? So in this instance, you need a system. And so they invented one. They invented what we now know today as writing. Now, family, I need you to sit with that for a second. Writing. This is the thing that defines civilization, makes history possible, that you and I use every single day without thinking about it. Right? This was not invented by, as we would know, as early day poets or lecturers or things of that nature. No, this was invented by temple administrators who wanted to keep record of what was going on in the lands during that time. So around 3200 BCE, we have writing. Also, family note that contemporaneously, right, we have a land as we might call today as Egypt, but back then it was known as the land of Kim. They also had writing during this time. It's a misconception that Mesopotamia first developed writing all on its own. When you go back in history and you look at what the soil say, then it's very clear that we see that these two empires, right, had their own styles of writing in the same contemporaneous age. So it wasn't so much as who did it first, right? It was more so who had the most influence. This is why a lot of people say writing started in Mesopotamia, because during that time you can see Mesopotamian writing with the most influence. When it comes to the land of Kemet, they kept a lot of their writing in-house. They didn't let it spread everywhere. When you do see Commission writing in other places, as we would like to call it, the Medu Neter, you normally see it in royal courts, or as we was just talking about, in temple administrators, because those were the ones who was communicating. Let's get into it, y'all. Hold on one second, y'all. I'm back, y'all. That was my wife calling me. And above all, I'm back, y'all. And above all, the ziggurat that stepped pyramid structure that defined the Mesopotamia. I don't even think I was right here. I apologize, y'all. Let me go back up here. Now, the temple economy. These temples aren't just religious centers. They were economic engines. The temple of Inanna at Uruk, very interesting. Hold on, let me get back here. This is very interesting. The temple at Inanna at Uruk, which we know Inanna, if Abraham was a person, we know this is a deity that he would have been worshiping way before he came in to who they know now as El. The Enoch complex functioned as a retribution center for farmers who brought their surplus to the temple. The temple stored it, possessed it, processed it, and distributed it to the laborers or craft workers, to the priesthood, to the poor. It was centralized economy center system managed by a literate bureaucracy. And above all, the ziggurat, that stepped pyramid structure that defined the Mesopotamian skyline. The ziggurat was a cosmic mountain, family. It was the meeting point between heaven and earth, the place where the Neters descended to commune with humanity, the place where the high priest or the priestesses ascended to meet the divine. It was a theological. It was the theology made architecture. Now, let me give you a primary source, the Sumerian Kings List. This is one of the most important documents in the ancient Near Eastern studies. It is a list of rulers, kings, dynasties stretching back to the very beginning of time. And listen, this is how it begins. When kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. In Eridu, alumni became the king. He ruled for 2,800 years. It says Elgar ruled for 36,000 years. Two kings that ruled for 64,000 years. The Eridu fell and the kingship was taken to Bad Torah. So the interesting thing about this is here we even see during this time civilizations did not separate their spiritual systems from their daily life systems. Unlike we do today, we separate education from religion, we separate education from business. Back in the day, they didn't do that. Everything was one. So their religion was ingrained with their business, with their trade, with their scripts. All of that was intertwined. All right, let's get here. All right, so here, right, we was just talking about writing and things that nature, right? So we got the 22 phonetic alphabets, right? So this right here, these are simple signs. Let's get into it. Let's see if why my thingy ain't okay. See, this is piss me off. All right, so let me stop sharing my screen for a minute because clearly that was crazy. All right, so I'm gonna keep going, fam. Let me keep going. All right, family, let's shift our gaze towards the west, across the Sinai Peninsula, across the desert to the Nile Valley. Because while Mesopotamia is inventing cities and writings and rivers and valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates, something equally extraordinary is happening along the banks of the longest river in Africa. Egypt, and specifically the Old Kingdom of Egypt, roughly 26,000 BCE to 2100 BCE, the age of the pyramids. Right now, we talked a little bit about this earlier when I was talking about the writing system, as people feel as though that Mesopotamia had the first writing system. It is noted that Kemet, even before it became Kemet, had writing. So they were doing this contemporaneously. Now, I could spend this entire series on Egypt alone, as y'all know I can, and barely scratch the surface. But what I want you to understand tonight is the fundamental difference between the Egyptian model and the Mesopotamian model, because it matters for everything that comes after. In Mesopotamia, you've got competing city-states, Uruk, Lagish, Eridu. They fought, they traded, they formed alliances, they betrayed each other, and it's a multipolar world. But in Egypt, however, Egypt is unified under one pharaoh, one divine king, one state. And the pharaoh isn't just a political ruler. The pharaoh is a living nature, as me and brother Ashe say all the time. He is the embodiment of Horus, the falcon. He is the son of Re, the sun. He is the manifestation of Ma'at, cosmic order, truth, justice, and proper functioning of the universe itself. When the pharaoh is strong, the Nile floods on the schedule. When the pharaoh is strong, the Nile floods right on schedule. The crops grow, and the nectar are pleased. When the pharaoh weak, chaos, Isfat is what we call it, is what we call Isfat, creeps in famine, disorder, and war. This is what scholars like Emile Kukar examines in his material, 2-volume work, The Ancient Near East, 3000 BC to 330 BCE, published by Routledge in 1995. Kukar shows Egyptian states formed, resetted on the ideology of divine kingship to compete. So total that the line between religion and politics simply did not exist, as I was just saying, right? So let's get down here to the Indus Valley. Now, family, I need to take you somewhere that's going to challenge everything you think you knew about ancient civilizations. We're going east, past Mesopotamia, past the Iranian plateau, through the mountains, past the Hindu Kush, down to the floor plans. Welcome to the Indus Valley. Civilizations, Harappa, and roughly 1,000 other cities spanning an area larger than the ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. This civilization flourished from about 2600 to 1900 BCE, right in the heart of the early Bronze Age window. Now, family, let me pause right here. I know the sister Samarian asked me earlier about the people and the things that I was going to be talking about. And so these valleys, the Indus Valley, Egypt, Samaria, these are powerhouses during this time, during the Bronze Age. This is the early Bronze Age we're talking about. These places are powerhouses, so they have their own language, they got their own civilization, they got their own quote unquote, as we like to call it today, religion. I call it a spiritual system. All of this, they have their own. Not only do they have their own, but they're also trading at this point in time. So that's why this is so important. Minoan Crete family. What I want to do is I want to get to the trade networks, right? All right, family. Now let's get to the trading networks. It's a obsidian, volcanic glass, razor sharp, beautiful, and geological distinctive. You can trace a piece of obsidian back to the specific volcano it comes from. Obsidian from Anatolia. So during this age, they wasn't just trading bronze. They was trading obsidian. They was trading other things. They was trading hemp. Maize, things of that nature. They was trading a whole lot of other things other than just bronze. You had copper coming from the island of Cyprus. You know what I'm saying? You had tin coming from Pakistan, which is now known as Afghanistan. And this is how the Bronze Age collapsed, or not collapse. I'm sorry, y'all. The Bronze Age first started to kick off because these people found out that you can take tin and I was just saying it, y'all. I'm sorry. You can take tin and copper, right? And you can put them together and you can make bronze. And they found out that when they did this, it was stronger than tin and copper on its own. The weaponry, the chariots came into play. They started finding out that you can actually start making other things with bronze, such as figurines, such as certain parts of the temple. And so during this time when they started to find out about bronze, bronze became a real hot commodity. Just like today we see gold, we see diamonds, we see rubies, right? Back in the day, bronze was set right up there. So earlier we talked a little bit about Sargon. And so Sargon, which we know as he rose from obscurity, according to later traditions, he started as a cupbearer, a court servant to the king of Kish, sometimes around 2300 to 2334 to 2330 BCE. He seized power, founded a new capital, called it Akkad or Agade. Oh, that's interesting. Its location has never been found. One of the archaeology's greatest missing cities. So the city that founded all of these other cities, they are still out on the look for. This was unprecedented. Before Sargon, Mesopotamia was a world of competing city-states. Fought for Lagash, Lagash fought for Umma, Uruk fought everybody. The Sumerian king list records dynasties after dynasties rising and falling. And so this is another thing that goes into the Bronze Age that a lot of people don't understand is kings and like rulers didn't last very long. And the reason rulers didn't last very long was because there was other competing rulers who wanted more land. You know what I'm saying? So this is where they wanted more land, they wanted more resources. You see what I'm saying? And so, of course, we know the only way you can get a resource from a place that's not trying to give you resources, now you have to go conquer that place. So now from Sargon on down, we get into social structures starting to actually pop up all over the place. And so in the early Bronze Age, Mesopotamia runs on what scholars call the temple palace economy, as we was talking earlier. The temple palace economy. There are two major institutional centers of power, the temple and the palace. Sometimes they are allied, sometimes they are in tension. And so in the Bronze Age, we've seen a lot of this. We've seen a lot of the priest would own their own thing, and the palace or the leadership would have its own rulership. And sometimes they're on one accord, which making the whole land stronger, and sometimes they're not on one accord, which makes the land weaker. We see this in history. For me personally, most notable in Akhenaten's reign, where the rulership and the priestlyship didn't get along, so that created a lot of war, internal conflict. In the early Bronze Age, we've seen a lot of this, and one of the main reasons we've seen a lot of this is because this was the first time civilization as we know it was expanding, right? It's just like the new Jordans that hit the block or the new iPhone hit the block. Everybody want a piece. And so with this, everybody was looking to compete for the biggest, because this was the time where even the small city states had a chance to become big empires. And later on, we actually start to see where this happens with places like the Hittite Empire and things of that nature. So family, I need you to brace yourself because we're about to. I don't know why I say that. That's crazy. Around 2200 BCE, something happens to the climate of the Eastern Mediterranean and Mesopotamia. A mega drought, not a dry season, not a few bad years, a profound, sustained, artificial event lasting 200 to 300 years. So this is another thing that was a big issue in the Bronze Age. Climate change. So on one instance, you had powers competing for one another. On the other instance, you had climate that was doing Mother Nature doing whatever she wanted to do, right? So you had from drought seasons, earthquakes, volcano eruptions, you had floods. So you had all of this going on while powers were competing for resources and land. And so ultimately what this did, right? I had a debate and where I thought that was my main premise, was the Bronze Age collapse. When we get to the collapse of the Bronze Age, ultimately with the competing powers and the and the environmental changes, we start to see where these large empires start to break down and lose control of their territories. So, for an example, right, Samaria, right, they started to break down. This is where we get the Babylons. This is where we get this is where we start getting the Chaldeans, things of that nature, right? We start to see the Shashu start to emerge and travel and migrate and do what they do, and then when we go into Canaan, we start to see the Hittites starting to emerge and do what they do. We start to see the people or the children of El is who they were called back then. The children of El separate themselves, start to do what they do, and it was all because of the situations that was taking place during that time, right? So when we start to get into the middle of the Bronze Age, when we ended the last segment, the Akkadian Empire had collapsed, the Three dynasty had fallen. This the Elamites had sacked the city of Ur. Right, so this goes into when I was talking about you had competing city states, right? So Ur at one point was a huge city state. And then you had these people come from the south called the Elamites. And when they came, they sacked the city of Ur. Now, the interesting thing here is when they sacked the city of Ur, they didn't stay there. So, which left Ur abandoned for about 1,200 years, for like 800 years, right? And during that abandonment period, that the land of which we known with Ur was abandoned, we started to see these other groups of people coming from the east known as the Chaldeans. And they wasn't called Chaldeans at first, the Chaldee, but they started to emerge, and they didn't settle in the exact place that Earth fell. They settled pretty close. But when they came with a they already came with a traditional system power from Canaan, right? From the southern Levant. And as they started to settle, what they realized is they ran into a bigger power, which was known as Babylon. And instead of Babylon conquering, well, not only want to say conquering, but instead of Babylon wiping them off the map, they conquered them and they took them in and they started to teach them. This is where Chaldean astrology come from. This is where Chaldean mathematics come from. So this is how the Chaldeans, the first reign of the Chaldeans, start to get their knowledge of certain technology. When it comes to astronomy, when it comes to math, when it comes to writing, this is how the Chaldeans got all of their resources. And the next chapter proves something very important. Destruction is not the same as extinction. The Bronze Age didn't end around 2000 BCE. It entered a second act. The second act is the Middle Bronze Age. So from roughly 2000 to 1500 BCE is where we find some of the most remarkable achievements of all of ancient history. We're going to meet Hammurabi of Babylon, whose law code still shapes how we think about justice. And that's important because when we deal with, as I was just talking about, all of these people fighting and things of that nature, during the time of Hammurabi, when he came to power, he was very influential. This is why you see a lot of Hammurabi codes in the Bible, right? And that's the reason this whole topic is so important, because when you actually know what happened during this time period, your understanding of what you see in the Bible become more clearer. So when they talk about not taking from your neighbor, when they're talking about not having no other gods before me, when they're given legal codes in the Bible, we understand that because of Babylon and how influential it is, a lot of these codes or laws or covenants that we see in the Bible come from the Hammurabi Code. And so that's another reason why this time period is so important. The Bible, I always say this, the Bible is the birth certificate of the Bronze Age. And that's because for the people who actually don't want to go and do the research, for the people who feel like, well, that ain't my job, I don't care what I want to know about that, I don't need to go all the way back there. Well, understand, when you're reading the Bible, you need to understand that this is the time period the people who's writing the Bible is trying to recreate. They're trying, and not only recreate, but they're trying to create it in their own worldview. We was talking earlier on the Ring of Fire, and I was explaining to Fire that in the Bible you see Israel often go to war with Canaan. The reason that is because of this era that we're talking about right now, the Bronze Age. During this period, and during the collapse of this period, when these people started to separate themselves from the main city states, they didn't want nothing to do with, the refugee and oppression they was just in. So what they did was they created stories to say they was always our enemy, because from their perspective, they was. It's no different than today when we see the Hebrew Israelites and they're telling the Bible, but they're telling it from a black perspective. And they're saying, well, Esau is the white man. Well, because from our known knowledge from being enslaved, they were the evil ones. They were the white mans. And so I'm saying that because that's how the children of El looked at the superpowers of Canaan when they were able to escape and be on their own. Um, by the end of the segment, we'll be standing on the threshold of the greatest of all, the late Bronze Age, the Golden Age, the peak and the fall. But first, Babylon. Let's go. Babylon or Hammurabi. Family, I want to introduce you to one of the most important documents in the history of human civilization. I want to start by telling you where it is right now today. In the Louvre in Paris, a black decorated stele, a tall finger-shaped stone pillar standing about 7.5 feet tall and top of the carved relief is a scene. A man standing before. Hey, I got this. I don't got my phone. I actually got this picture though. The Code of Hammurabi. I actually got this picture. I actually just went to the Walters Art Museum, and in the Walters Art Museum, they literally have a recreation of that same stele. That's so funny. The Code of Hammurabi, composed around 1754 BCE, not the first law code. Ur-Nammu's code from Ur-3 dynasty predates by roughly 3 centuries, but Hammurabi's code is the most comprehensive, the most detailed, and the most famous legal document to survive from the ancient world. Now, before I read you some of these laws, I want to set the stage. Hammurabi didn't just start as the ruler of a great empire. He inherited a small kingdom centered on the city of Babylon, which at the time was relatively minor player in a Mesopotamia fragmented among the dozen other competing Amorite kingdoms. It took Hammurabi decades of patent diplomacy and strategic warfare to unify most of Mesopotamia under Babylonian rule. Now, what's so interesting about Hammurabi is we can say he was literally one of the first people who thought about, in a sense, how I play on words, New World Order, right? Because a lot of rulers during this time was cool with what they had. Hey, we'll trade with you, but we cool with what we had. Hammurabi, because of who he came up under, he understood the game that they were playing in the Bronze Age. He understood trading goods is one thing. Me having control over the very resource itself is another thing. And he understood that for me to have control over these resources, I gotta try to unite all of these people under one umbrella, right? And so that was his idea of why he wanted to go. His idea wasn't so much as conquering, so to be secure. You see what I'm saying? He wanted to be secure with the economics that he had. And so by doing that, he went out and he wanted to make sure that he secured other, that word keep leaving my head. But he wanted to go out and secure other economic trade routes, basically. Let's get it. It's a let's get to the laws. It's a family. Listen to those actual words from our bam. It's a now before I read it. All right, it's a micromanager who personally involved himself in everything and can now maintenance to individual disputes. But his legacy rests on the law code and the prologue. Listen to this. So this is the code of Hammurabi. When lofty Anum, king of the Anum, that's funny, and Enlil, lord of the heavens and earth, the Demeter of the destinies of the land, determined for Marduk, the firstborn of Enki, and Enlil functions all over mankind. So when we do this on Fire Panel a lot over across the street when we're talking about quote unquote these gods, right? And so in the Hammurabi Code is the first time where we start to see reference to number one, the Anunnaki, number two, Enlil, Marduk, people like that. We start to see Not only do we start to see these gods take place in this code, but during this time in the Bronze Age, we start to see how other city states start to become influenced by these deities. You know, so it's a law 196. If a man put out the eye of another free man, his eye shall be put out. That's Lex Tallion, the law of retaliation, an eye for an eye. Look, we still use that today. That comes from the Hammurabi's code. An eye for an eye, perpetual justice. The punishment fits the crime, but notice it says another free man, because law 199 says if he puts out the eye of a man's slave, he shall pay 1/2 of the slave's value. So, they had a code, as we was just talking, an eye for an eye. But back then it wasn't just an eye for an eye. It was, okay, well, if you do something to a free man, then that free man get to do something to you. But if you do something to a slave, now that's injustice, that's unjustified. Now you gotta pay off that slave's ransom. So basically, you gotta make that slave your slave. You just can't go around victimizing other people's slaves, basically. So these are just some of the codes that we get into when we deal with Hammurabi. So what I want to do now, family, I want to get into the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. 20,000 BCE to 2000 BCE to 1650 BCE. Let's go back to Egypt, family, because while Hammurabi is codifying laws in Babylon and the Hittites are considering in Anatolia, Egypt is going through its own renaissance, and it produces something that, in my opinion, is one of the greatest achievements of the Bronze Age civilization literature. After the Old Kingdom collapsed, that's the Pyramid Age we talked about in segment 1. Egypt entered what Egyptologists call the first intermediate period, about 150 years of political fragmentations. Okay, so let me explain to y'all what an intermediate period is when it comes to Kemet. An intermediate period is when the rulers on the throne are not Egyptian. So this is the time where we had the Hittites, we had a couple other people who actually came and sat on the throne. Again, what we have to understand here in the Bronze Age, even in the middle of the Bronze Age, is people didn't rule for very long, right? So you probably got a good 10 to 12 years out of a ruler if they were doing everything properly and he wasn't cutting no corners. If a ruler just got in power and did whatever they wanted to do, you probably get a good 2, 3, 4, 5 years out of them. But we have to understand that rulers did not last long. So when we're dealing with the intermediate period in Kemet, we have to understand in this intermediate period, Kemet then went through 5, 6 rulers. You know what I'm saying? All right. Excuse me, y'all. But around 2055 BCE, Theban rulers named Menotep reunited Egypt, launched the Middle Kingdom, and this period, roughly 255 BC to 1650 BCE, is often called the classical age of Egyptian civilization. Not because of monumental buildings, though the Middle Kingdom does build just on more modest scale, but most of the flowering of Egypt literature, art, religious thought. And so this is when Egypt is going into, as I was saying earlier, into a Renaissance era. So it started making literature more prominent. It started making art more prominent. It started making the spiritual systems more prominent. And this was something that we have to understand that the rest of the world wasn't ready for yet. Before this age, this is an important note. Before this age, rulers could not read or write. And so the letters that we find in the early Bronze Age, right, from a ruler to a ruler, is literally a vizier to another vizier. During this time, the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, we start to see the first pharaohs writing on their own and getting it overseen by a vizier. Now, the issue with this is the ruler in the other countries or city states can't read. So while I'm a ruler talking to another ruler, the other ruler have no idea what I'm saying because they can't read. And so this as well played a large portion of betrayal in the fall of city states. Um I'm I lost my place. Um the Creek and the Midianites. Anatolia, I'm sorry. So we see what I was just talking about in Anatolia and Crete, right? So during the early Bronze Age, what Crete did was they sent a couple of their people over to what was what they known as Anatolia, and how we would classify it is a classified invasion mission, right? You have to be stealthy, you have to pretend to be one of them, fit in. And what they were doing was they were learning this culture, taking it back to their people so they can then know how to come and invade these people. So, man, it was crazy back in the Bronze Age. That also brings up another thing I wanted to touch on. Oftentimes we say there's nothing new under the sun. And when you go and you look throughout history, you really get a sense of how true this is. Because when we talking about spies and we talk about agents and we talk about infiltration, when you go back to the earliest Bronze Age and even in the Middle Bronze Age, we see a lot of this same type of tactical movement. You know what I'm saying? And so this is why the Pharaoh learning how to read and write himself is very important. Eventually, the new Pharaoh, Senunat the First, hears of Shinsu and sends a letter inviting him back. And the moment Shinsu reads the letter, the joy is overwhelming. He returns and restores a favor given to the tomb, the ultimate maker belonging to Egypt's society. He will spend eternity in Egypt. The exile is over. Family, this story isn't just entertainment, it's a theology, it's political philosophy. It says Egypt is the center of the world. To leave Egypt is to leave civilization itself. An Egyptian who lives among foreigners, no matter how successful, is diminished because Egypt isn't just a country, it's the cosmic order and manifest. And the Pharaoh isn't just a ruler, it's literally the governmental system that holds everything together. This is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying that Sargon and Hammurabi, they had a certain mindset from a lot of other ruling nations in that part of the world, right? So we see even how their mindset was different from the rulers in Kemet mindset was, right? Like their mindset was, okay, well, we need all of these resources, so let's go kill everything. In Kemet, their mindset was, well, we feel as though we're the pinnacle. So while we don't have issues doing trade with anybody, we not about to go and take this whole place over. We not about to go and conquer all of these resources. And this goes into a conversation I had, I think, a week ago where I was saying, Kemet, they wasn't conquerors. They didn't look at themselves as having, it's like, to put in the lack of better words, right? It's like a rich person or a famous person, right? Eddie Murphy or somebody, right? They don't go out looking to steal stuff from other people because they feel as though, yo, I got everything I need. And so this is the mindset that the Cometians have. Think about what this reveal about the Middle Kingdom anxieties. Why does the story resonate so powerfully that it's copied and recopied for centuries? Because the first intermediate period proved that Egypt can fall apart. The unthinkable happened. The center didn't hold, and the tale of Shenu is the central response. The resonance that the center exists and that it endures, that's a good Egyptian always come home. Okay, so now this is interesting because during this time, Egypt gets a culture shock, right? The Middle Kingdom shows Kemet that we're not untouchable. We're not unbreakable. We're not unbendable. Like, we can get taken over, right? And so this is what kills me when people say Kemet didn't have science, or they didn't have politics, or they didn't have these things, because they literally learned from their mistakes. So the late kingdom didn't make the same mistakes as the Middle Kingdom because they learned. Let's get into it. The Minoan, Della Socrates, and its peak. And let me see how much. So we're gonna get to the late Bronze Age, y'all. We're gonna get all the way down here to the late Bronze Age. The most interconnected, most sophisticated, most brilliantly organized civilization system humanity has yet to create. A world full of great kings bound together by diplomacy, trade, marriage, mutual dependency. A world where a single ship could carry goods from 7 different cultures, where the letters written in Babylon could be read in Egypt, the Haiti in Haiti, and Mycenae, where the collapse of any one power threatened all of the rest. So this was the issue in the Bronze Age, right? By the late Bronze Age, the systems got so connected, where you got the Babylonians, you got the Egyptians, you got the Mycenaeans, you got the Hittites, you got all of these people. And if any one of these people fell out of power, it would hurt the rest of the structure. And so, because both the climax and the catastrophe, the height and heights and the lows of lows, the most magnificent achievements of the Bronze Age civilization and its total irreversible destruction. One guiding framework for the segment comes from Eric Klein's land book, 1177 BCE, The Year Civilization Collapsed, published by Princeton University Press in 2014, the revised in 2021. Klein is a professor of classical and anthropology at George Washington University, and his book has become the definitive popular account of the Levant Bronze Age collapse. His central argument, and I'll return to it again and again, is the collapse wasn't caused by any single factor, not the sea people, not the earthquakes, not the droughts, not the invasions. It was a perfect storm. Now, this is interesting because as we see throughout the Bronze Age, in different periods of the Bronze Age, as I talked about, in the beginning, you see things happen, but it didn't destroy the Bronze Age. In the Middle Bronze Age, you see civilizations rise and collapse, but it didn't destroy the Bronze Age. Now, in the Late Bronze Age, because civilizations got so tight-knit, and resources and trade became so tight-knit because of the ships, they were building better ships and things of that nature. Because their trading routes became so tight-knit, one political power relied on another political power to stay strong. And if only one of these political powers fell, then the whole marginalized systems fell apart. This is the importance of the Sea People. Now, while some historians try to explain to us who the Sea People are, we really don't have no definitive identification on who the Sea People are. One thing we know is that they were great navigators of the sea. This is why they're called the Sea People. A lot of people have the misconception that they were called the Sea People because they came from somewhere on the island of Manoa, Crete, when this is not true. There is no proof that these people came from these islands. In fact, when we see, I'm mad I couldn't get I couldn't get the slide for the boat, but we see the boat of the sea people underwater. We got pictures, archaeology evidence, and what it show is that the boat of the sea people didn't match any boat along the eastern coast during that time. So it wasn't a ship that looked like a ship from Crete. It wasn't a ship that looked like a ship from Anatolia. It wasn't a ship that looked like a ship from Kemet. You know what I'm saying? Their best guess is it came from somewhere, a little minor state. They came from a little minor city or a minor place, southern of Mesopotamia. But that's the best guess they have. And the only reason they have that guess is because of the inscriptions on the ships are Mesopotamian inscriptions. But we have to realize during this time in the Bronze Age, right? You had different cultures displayed on with different cultures. So you might have a Mesopotamian ship with Metal Netra on it. You might have a Cometian ship, right, with cuneiform on it, right? And so this is why, and the reason, let me go back to this for a second as well. The reason this was important, the reason they did these was to show who their allies were. You see what I'm saying? So if you're coming into a port and you coming from another nation, I need to know that you're one of my people. And so by me, how I know that you're one of my people is I can find my inscriptions on your ship. You see what I'm saying? And so this is why, just because we can see Mesopotamian inscriptions on a ship doesn't necessarily make it a Mesopotamian ship. Let's get into it. So the Club of the Great Powers. All right, family. Let me paint a picture. It's roughly 1400 BCE. The late Bronze Age is in full swing, and the Near Eastern world, from the Aragon to the Zagros Mountains, from Anatolia to Nubia, is dominated by 6 great powers, 6 kingdoms, so powerful, so wealthy, so military formidable that they form an informal club, an elite fraternity of great kings, right? Let me name a few for you. First, we got the New Kingdom of Egypt. I called the Late Kingdom earlier. That's what I meant to call the New Kingdom. The New Kingdom of Egypt, the superpower, the wealthiest state in the Bronze Age world, sitting on gold mines of Nubia, and the architectural bounty of the Nile, ruled by pharaohs who claim to be living Neteru, Thutmose III, Amenhotep III, Akhenaten, and Ramses. Second is the Hittites. The Hittite Empire, the military powerhouse of Anatolia, controlling the vital overland trade routes between Mesopotamia and Aegean, which is crazy, Aegean, ruled from the fortified capital of Hattusa, which with an army built for heavy chariot forces. Third, the Mitanni, a Haran-speaking kingdom in Upper Mesopotamia and northern Syria, centered on the Kabura River region. The Mitanni is the balancing power, the kingdom that sits between the Hittite and the Egyptians, and plays them against each other. So this is important because I was talking about this earlier about these major superpowers. There were a few major superpowers. Now the issue is the Mitanni people or groups, small powers like the Mitanni, saw the Bronze Age as an opportunity. I was talking about that earlier. And one way they saw the Bronze Age as an opportunity is if they could replace a superpower in the Bronze Age. This is why the late Bronze Age, instead of them trying to take down Egypt by themselves. They just went after the Hittites because they were weaker. But what they wanted to do was they wanted to take the place of a superpower. And so by doing that, like I said before, man, ain't nothing new under the sun. They tried to play the superpowers against one another. So they try to play the Hittites versus the Egyptians, the Babylonians versus the Hittites, the Cassaites, Babylonians versus the Hittite. So like they would try to get a nation state to fall so that they can then take that power. The Kassite Babylonia. After the Hittites sacked Babylon in 1595 BCE, a dynasty of Kassites rulers took over, and they ruled over 4 centuries, the longest dynasty in Babylon history. Under the Kassites, Babylon became a center of learning, religion, and cultural prestige, right? And so this is so just as we just seen with the Hittites, because the Hittites was a small power during this time too. This is why they tried to get the larger powers to play off against each other, because if I know that Egypt is stronger than Babylon, and if I can get Egypt to weaken Babylon, then I can come in and take over Babylon, and then I can make it whatever I want it. You see what I'm saying? So these are the games that they played back in the day with one another. Like I said, it was brutal back in the day. Also, we can't forget about Assyrian. In the 14th century, Assyria emerged from the Mycenaean shadows of an independent great power, aggressive, militaristic, and increasingly ambitious. Ashur-uballit, our rights to the pharaoh, depending on Ashur-uballit the first, right to the pharaoh, demanding to be treated as equal as brothers. And so what we see with the Assyrian, when they emerge from the Mycenaeans, is it's just like anybody that's new that's coming to sit at a poker table. You see what I'm saying? Any new basketball team joining the NBA. You ain't about to look down on me because we new here. We want to be treated as equals. We ain't coming to fight y'all. Y'all ain't coming to fight us. We can do trade. We got resources. You got resources. Let's work this out. You working with them and them and them. Why can't you come over here and work with me? You know what I'm saying? And last but not least, we got the Mycenaean Greeks, right? And so these were the tax collectors, right? So when when the Egyptians needed somebody, like when for an example, when the Assyrians owed the Egyptians taxes, they didn't go out there and get it on their own. They sent the Mycenaeans. Hey, y'all, yeah, we need our stuff from them. We need y'all to go get our stuff back from them. You know what I'm saying? And so this is real mobster like. This is real. They back in the day they were real mobster like, right? And so I know a lot of people wonder, well, how did all these different nations and different people communicate, right? They all communicated in Akkadian, right? The diplomatic language of the age was Akkadian. The age is cuneiform tablets quarried by royal messengers who travel under diplomacy protection. A message from the Hisua to Thebes might take weeks, months, but it gets there. The system works. This is not a collection of isolated kingdoms. This is a system, an interconnected web, whereas the prosperity of each end depends on the stability of all. Well, the failure of one threatens the rest. Where bronze, the metal that defines the age, literally cannot be produced without the cooperation of multiple states, because the copper and tin come from different regions. So this is the reason why we had the elite in the first place, right? I can't get to you to get all the way over here. So we need these people. and we need you to be a bridge between us and these people. You see what I'm saying? Now, if we come conquer y'all and we wipe y'all out, and now we sitting here, we may not be able to get to these people because we don't have a relationship between these people with these people like y'all do. So this is another reason why they set up interconnected trade with one another. And this is why they all use a political language such as Akkadian. It's precisely that interconnection, that beautiful, sophisticated, brilliantly engineered independence that makes the system fatally fragile. Exactly, as I was saying earlier, because all it takes is for someone to go send a spy or for someone to write the wrong message. Because mind you, a lot of this time, well, this is the late Bronze Age, so some of the kings during that time could read and write, not all of them. But this is following off of the era where the ruling class wasn't educated. So if I tell my messenger, go out and do this, and my messenger don't like me, he can go out and write whatever he want to write. You see what I'm saying? Then he can come back with a forged message, and then he can read that message to me because I can't read and write. So he can, you know what I'm saying? So they were really sabotaging each other like that back in the day. So let's get down here. So we talked about the sea people. We talked about the collapse of power. Let's talk about what happened after the collapse, right? All right, so the old world is gone. Every palace burned, every trade route severed. The great kings are dead or foreigners. And just in case y'all haven't heard me talking for about 1 hour and 12 minutes, what caused this great collapse? A number of different things, right? From natural disaster to political sabotage. You see what I'm saying? From just resources running out. You know, so it wasn't one thing that caused the Great Bronze Age collapse. It was a myriad of different things. And so we're going to talk about, okay, what happened after this. So now what, family? The question that opens our the question that opens our final segment, and I want to be very careful about how we frame it, because the traditional narrative, the one you'll find in a lot of older textbooks, called What Comes Next, the Dark Age, the Greek Dark Age, the collapse of civilization, a long black night before the dawn of classical Greece, and that narrative is wrong, or rather it is incomplete, misleading, or too simple. Yes, there was a catastrophic destruction. Yes, populations collapse. Yes, writing systems are lost. Yes, material standards of the living drop dramatically across much of the Eastern Mediterranean. All of that is true, and we'll go through the evidence. But what also happens, and this is what the traditional narrative misses, it's a transformation, radical, creative, world-changing transformation, because the destruction of the older does not just eliminate things, it clears space for new things that couldn't have emerged while the old place systems were in place. Number one, the alphabet. Similar and more accessible than cuneiform or hieroglyph. This spread across the Mediterranean, iron technology, locally producible, free-form, and long-distance trade. Dependence on bronze, putting metal tools to use weapons in the hands of common people for the first time. The Greek polis, the city-state. This is right here. I got it. Bang. The city-state. The seabed of democracy emerged in a landscape stripped in a palace of monopolists. Monotheism takes root in tiny Levant kingdom with the great powers barely noticed. Family, what rises from the ashes of the Bronze Age will shape everything, and I mean everything, that comes after: the political structure, the religious ideas, the technological basis, and the literary traditions that define the Western world and much of the Eastern world have their origins not in the Bronze Age itself, but aftermath of the destruction. And I want to trace that transformation to the same way we trace the Bronze Age, through the evidence, through the archaeological record, inscription, and text, the material culture. No myths without evidence, no narratives without sources. Let's begin the scale of what was lost, the scale of destructions, what the evidence show. Before we talk about what was built, family, we need to be honest about what was destroyed, because the scale of the late Bronze Age collapse is staggering. In Greece, the evidence points to population loss of 75 to 90% in some regions, not a typo, not an exaggeration. Archaeological survived settlements patterns show that a dramatic reduction in the numbers and size of occupied city-states between 1200 and 1050 BCE. The great palace complexes Mycenaean, Pylos, Tyrrhenian, and Thebes was destroyed and never rebuilt as palaces. The elaborate bureaucrat systems they maintained, the redistribution economics tracked in lines B, vanished overnight. And with them, writing itself disappeared from Greece. Linear B, the script that Michael Van Trist deciphered in 1952, ceases to exist for roughly 400 years. So, with the Bronze Age collapse, writing in Greece ceased to exist for 400 years. Crazy. It says from about 1100 to 750 BCE, Greece illustrates no writing records, no administrative archives, no inscriptions. The knowledge of writing is lost, and it won't return until the Greeks adopt and adapt the Phoenician alphabet to the 8th century BCE. This is important. This is important because here we have a alphabet, the Phoenician alphabet, right? Adopted by the Greeks in the 8th century BCE. This same alphabet, the Hebrew people will call Hebrew. And they will say, oh, well, it's our language, it's our Hebrew, and that's different than Canaanite. But when you line up the Phoenician alphabet with the Canaanite alphabet, it's the exact same alphabet. Now, why is that so important, family? That is so important because it lets us know that the Hebrew people never had their own script or language. The people from the Levant never had their own script or language. It was a continuous script and language, right? And another thing about this is Phoenician and Akkadian is very related. So remember when we was talking about the late Bronze Age, and Akkadian was used as the political language for trade. So why was it so easy for the Greeks to pick up Phoenician? Was because they was already using Akkadian before they start writing. So the jump from Akkadian to Phoenician is not a big leap, you know. Iron technology, and let me get to the end of this because I've been going for a while. And that's why I'm mad I ain't got my slides, because I have my slides. I feel like I'd have been done. All right. I'm gonna read one more thing and then we done. Uh, the scholastic synthesis. Come in. The scholastic synthesis. What evidence tells us? All right, family.
Hey, Mom.
Let me step back from the narrative for a moment. We've been telling stories, vivid human dramatic stories for almost 4 segments. And stories are essential. They're how we connect with the past. But a scholar doesn't just tell stories, a scholar synthesizes. A scholar asks, what does all of this mean? What do the patterns tell us? So let me give you a synthesis. The big picture. What's the evidence? All of it taken together. Reveal about the Bronze Age and its collapse and its aftermath. First, the collapse restructured the connectivity. The Bronze Age trade networks were centralized, palace-driven, and dependent on small numbers of critical checkpoints. 10 routes, copper supply, diplomatic protocols between great kings. When those networks failed, everything connected to them failed too. But the Iron Age trade networks that emerged, Phoenician maritime commerce, Greek colonization, overland Armenian trade, were more distributed, more resilient, and ultimately more extensive. By 700 BCE, the maritime trade world was larger and more diverse than anything the Bronze Age had ever produced. As Barry Clifton argued, the collapse didn't end connectivity, it reconfigured it. So basically, for the Iron Age to even come into existence, we needed a period for the people to actually get a understanding of what metallurgy was. Not only that, but with the building of new civilizations, right? And when I'm saying industrial civilizations, I'm speaking of the Iron Age. With this came new scripts, came new trading routes, and not just trading routes, the biggest. So this is another learning method, family, that what we see here in the Iron Age one is not just small mishaps. Okay, we learned from this, we learned from that, this happened, that happened, this happened. But what we see is they learned from their mistakes, right? And they said, okay, well, now we got the gist of this. Now we can make it bigger. Now we can make it better. You see what I'm saying? Because we can build off of what happened in the Bronze Age. And I'm gonna land with that, family. I'm gonna land my time with that. I've been going for an hour and 22 minutes. I'm ready to get some questions. I'm ready to have some. I'm ready to get some questions answered. I'm ready to have some discussions, things of that nature. Let's get it. Let's get it. Who is this on the side of me right here? Who up here with me? Who up here with me? Right. Look, I put everybody to sleep up this motherfucker.
Say what? I'm not asleep.
Samarian ain't sleep. Samarian ain't sleep. What's up, Samarian? Samarian said I ain't sleep.
Nothing. I've been over here taking notes.
Oh, I'm finished, Samarian.
Okay. I don't know where everybody's at. They supposed to be ready to
I was over
fire,
here for a whole
light
hour.
up your world.
They ain't got no long attention spans. I was over here talking for like 30 minutes. Like, oh no, this nigga really got a presentation. I'm mad my damn slides didn't come out the way I wanted them to. That pissed me off. But other than that, I feel like I still brought the information that was valuable.
So,
Oh my God.
the whole concept of the Bronze Age came out of let me make sure I got this right. Babylon, right?
Did the Bronze Age come out of Babylon?
The
Nah, it was there.
concepts.
The concepts.
No, the concept of the Bronze Age in and of itself came out of
Yes.
Babylon.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And because while you were talking, I went to pulling out different sources to, just do
Yeah.
my own check on your information, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And it reads here that the first head beginning of gold represents the first kingdom on earth, which is Babylon. It's man made, ruled by men. Following is the chest and arms of silver, belly of bronze, legs of iron, feet comprised of a mixture of iron and clay.
Well,
Now,
that would have been in the Iron Age, right? Because I know they wasn't using Iron Age in the Bronze. They wasn't using iron in the Bronze Age, because they had to go to different places to get the materials to make the bronze.
oh, you're talking about proto-industrialism?
Yeah. They had the That's why they had to go to Anatolia and Crete, because that's where the tin was. And then they had to go to Afghanistan. No, they had to go to Anatolian Creek because that's where the copper was. And they had to go to Afghanistan because that's where the tin was.
Okay. Well, it sounds about right for that particular time period. But there's certain agriculture that was imported into the Levant, um, and that agriculture only grows over here in America.
Mm. That's facts. That's what they say. They say things like that. That's the interesting thing. I don't think, because they do have, not that I've researched, actually that's what I showed you right now. Things such as maize, right? Because they do have a lot of things that was traded. I don't think maize was one of, I don't think the maize that came from America was one of the things that was traded. I have heard of some people say they had maize that was being traded in Kemet. But I don't know if they record that a lot. But there are some things that stick out like that, with the trading post. But I don't know. Let me see that right now though. I don't know how accurate that is. Was maize?
Yeah, because that was part of your list. According to what you said a little earlier, you mentioned trading. Um, I don't know, networks. You mentioned trading
Yeah,
networks, and you mentioned Obsidian from Anatolia,
right.
and
Obsidian
then
from
you went
Anatolia.
down a list of hemp, maize,
Yeah.
bronze, copper, and tin. And maize isn't um, a natural food staple, except it being traded from the Americas, where it grows naturally.
Yes. So, Made was traded, but it was only traded in the Americas. So Maize was traded in the Bronze Age, but it was only traded in the Americas um in the Bronze Age.
Okay. Also, you mentioned Sargon of Akkad, and I believe that Sargon is before the Bronze Age, right?
No, that's right in the mix of the Bronze Age. Sargon the Great.
Okay, hold on. I'm just gonna
It's like early
speed
Bronze
this
Age.
back out a quick reference.
Yeah, I spoke about him in the early Bronze Age.
See. And that date was, you said hold on, let me look at these notes. 2000 through 1900 BCE.
Oh, shit.
So that was between the 2000, the Middle Kingdom, and Dynasty 12 of Kemet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, at that particular time, Mesopotamia had developed its own dynasties.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why they were contemporaneous. So a lot of people um they want to fall under this or that umbrella when dealing with this stuff. And a lot of issue with that is because people normally who study like these type of cultures, they only dealing with one culture or another one. So you have one scholar to say, oh hey, well this writing came before this writing, or another scholar say this writing came before that writing. And when you literally like line up all the cultures during that period, you'll find out that there were many different cultures who had their own thing going on contemporaneous with everybody else. You know what I'm saying? So
I'm gonna show you my source. So I'm coming from here because Sargon the Great pops up right there.
mm-hmm.
And it reads under the extraordinarily energetic king, the fabled Sargon the Great, the Akkadians moved against Sumer, which now paid for its prolonged political follies by being brought under complete Semitic domination. Once again, unification opportunities were offered, although differing in ethnic background, Sumer and Akkad had much in common. For 2 millennia, Akkad had absorbed Sumerian culture so completely that the two peoples had become virtually one in language, arts, religion, and general social habits.
Mm-hmm.
So, with
Finish him!
Sumerian, Akkadians, and Babylonians being part of Mesopotamian chronology. And of course, Kemet having its own dynasties. When did that become? When did those become rivals?
They became rivals during the late Bronze Age. As I was saying, you had kingdoms such as the Hittite kingdom. You had different couple of other small groups who were playing the big powers against one another. You see what I'm saying? So during the late Bronze Age is when you start to see the big powers start to feud with one another because the smaller powers were causing strife between the bigger powers. So they can then come in and take over the power seat of whoever fell in that war.
Mm.
Just like when, hold on, let me go back to it. I can really fast, sister. I want to go back to it. Where my thing at? I just want to go back to this real quick. Um, 'Cause I can't remember their names off here. I was just reading it. It's crazy. But I want to say the Assyrians. I want to say the Assyrians. But after like they came to power, they were making the Hittites and the Egyptians fight one another.
Who?
Once the Assyrian, I think it was the Assyrians I was talking about. When they came to power, when they came over power, and they finally started getting into the economic, then they was making the Hittites and the Egyptians fight one another. Like that's what they would do. They would make them fight, get in the streets with one another. The Minoan treasury, the Mari letters. Where the heck?
Okay.
Looking for little bondage. Hold on a second.
So you said that the Hittites were being made to fight against the Egyptians?
I believe I'm trying to get it right now. It probably wasn't the Hittites. All right, the club of the big powers, the Mycenaean, the Greeks, the Midrash. Interesting. All right. All right. Okay, so the Mitanni people, the Haranian people. I'm sorry, it wasn't the Assyrians. It was the Haranian people, the Haranian speaking people, from Upper Mesopotamia, right? This was another small group, one of them small groups. When they finally came up, they were playing off Egypt and the Hittites. They were playing off Egypt and the Hittites. And then in the 14th century, we got the Assyria. They emerged from the Metarian shadow. And we know the Metarians, they were people who were older, who settled in northern Syria. So we have all these different group of small peoples. That's another reason why the Bronze Age is so important, because we have all these different groups of people who are literally shifting in social power during this time, right? Real rapidly too. And it's all due to who's your ally and who's your enemy. So that was a great question, Sister. That was a great question, Sister Samara, because there was a certain time where they had the elite powers, and the elite powers relied on one another. They relied on their resources. They relied on their trade networks. You know what I'm saying? And the smaller powers realized that I can't become a player in this game unless one of these superpowers fall. So we gotta put these two superpowers against each other so we can take the place of whoever fall. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I'm looking over the Hittite Empire and the New Empire, and yes, the Hurrians are in there, but it's not quite. Let's see, by 1200 BC. That's the end of the Bronze Age, though. But the Hittite Empire as a Near Eastern power state had disappeared from history. And that's because as a new empire, let's see, under Suppululumus the First, 1375 through 1335 BC, the Hammurabi of the Hittites, the Hittite Empire absorbed the Hurrians and took over a number of Amaru's border towns. Amaru means Westerner, of course, or more, if you will. Anyway, Egyptians and Hittites had clashed before, but now they engaged in a long series of encounters which ultimately sapped the strength of both. In 1296 BC at Kadesh on the Orontes, armies of the two empires met in an extended battle which proved that neither could conquer the other. Even worse, it became clear that each state, by the endless fighting, had bled itself weak beyond recovery. Less than a half century later, the marauding Sea Peoples, who I think you said you had an issue identifying properly, but that
Yeah.
would take a whole nother session. But anyway, the Sea Peoples poured into Anatolia, and the Palestinian region scattered the imperial forces of both powers. By 1200 BC, the Hittite Empire as a Near Eastern power state had disappeared from history. Despite their control of a substantial portion of Asia Minor for nearly a millennium, the Hittites never succeeded in creating a civilization after the manner of the Egyptians and Mesopotamians.
Yep.
So the
And
Egyptians, okay.
I apologize. And so the reason that we was talking about the Sea People is because when you was reading, you heard them say, they came down and went into Anatolia, and when they were looking at those ships had Mesopotamian writing, but the ship's design wasn't Mesopotamian, and so they would say that these were people who settled along the coast, in southern Mesopotamia or eastern Mesopotamia, but people question the actual ship's design. You know what I'm saying? That's why I say it's questionable when people try to pinpoint who the Sea People are, because in large groups we could say, okay, it was Mesopotamia. You see what I'm saying? But then somebody who is a fanatic about these things, they'll go deep into the questions. Okay, well, if they were Mesopotamian, then why isn't there ships of Mesopotamian design? And who knows, man? Maybe they could have came up with a new way to build the ship, and you know what I'm saying? So that's why I left that part a little obscure, because I didn't want to put a definite on who these people were, because there is other evidence that say that these people could be somebody else.
Fair enough.
But everything else you said, exact, you ran it down just how as I was explaining it. During this age, this was in the late Bronze Age, and this is exactly what Sister Samara was reading, was like I was saying earlier, one of the reasons for the Bronze Age collapse, right? It wasn't just environmental shift or global, like whatever. It wasn't just things with the environment. It just wasn't greedy, hungry people. You had smaller city states that wanted to get more power as well. You see what I'm saying? You had people, you had smaller states trying to get in there. But what they didn't realize, just as she read as well, is some of these superpowers were so powerful, they were so equally matched that this is why they came up with the elite superpowers in the first place. Because if I take you out, I can't take you out with getting damaged myself. That's number one. But number two, if I do take you out, now our trade route is lost. Like, you see what I'm saying? So I can't damage you without damaging myself. And just what Sister Samaya was reading, that's another reason for the actual Bronze Age collapse was while certain superpowers understood that, the smaller superpowers coming up, they felt as though I'm going to get y'all to fight and then we're going to take over whoever loses. They didn't understand that, okay, well, if we fight and we both get damaged, then there's no table for you to sit at.
Right. And I just want to say, as a repetition for my bro, like that kind of was fucked up. For us as women, just say, well, if it hurts you, let's not talk about it or whatever. And we will, but is that right?
Right.
Just saying. Like, our brother is sitting here talking about stuff. We go through stuff on a daily basis. Like, we need to stop.
Yeah. And that it so what I learned from this whole thing is don't be too fast to move on things you don't know. Right? When you and it makes sense. It's like when you're the first person doing hip hop, when you're the first person doing poetry, when you're the first person writing books, you don't understand all the parameters. But as you become the fourth person writing a book or the fifth person writing a book or the second rapper that came out, you didn't already had a chance to see how this game is played. And so now it's just like how we live today. You know, the younger generation get a chance to see how the older generation live and do things. And so the younger generation get a chance to come and reinvent things and do things better and stand on the backs of what was already happening. You see what I'm saying? And so when you take your time, when you're trying to build something, and when if you take your time and you are aware as you're supposed to be, then you can avoid a lot of dangers that come along with what you're trying to do. You know, that's what we've seen in the Bronze Age collapse. I brought a couple of that out as how the Cometians, you know, they learned from their mistakes. The Assyrians learned from the Babylonians' mistakes. You know, people in history, they were just learning from their mistakes. Okay, they did it this way. This is where they messed up. We gonna do it this way, and we gonna get it right. You know what I'm saying? So it's all trial and errors. Trial and error. Just don't give up.
So how would you compare the collapse of the Bronze Age to the current age of the mixture of clay and iron, I think it is?
Yeah. The Bronze Age was a teaching moment in history. I feel like so much was happening. It's interesting. I feel like the Bronze Age was like the media age, except we just got information faster. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't think when the Bronze Age came, I don't think the common folk really understood. It was like it was like the iPhone coming out for the first time, right? Everybody like, ooh, that's nice. What's that? Let's all get that. And before you know it, you got 1 billion iPhones sold, So with the production of bronze for the first time, right? You have just so many people that's like, oh, what's that? What can we do with that? And so this is why I think they had so many failures and so many intermediate periods during this time, because people simply just didn't. It's just like now, right? In the social media era, we got so many failed businesses today because people just don't know what to do with social media. And so in that era, people just didn't know what to do with that valuable resource at the time. And so that's why we've seen so many intermediate periods.
Well, I think it was a lot more. I think it was a lot more. Shalom to the panel, by the way. What's going on? Shalom, brother. It was a good breakdown. Not too much pushback, but a little bit. It's always gonna be that little bit. But as far as like a lot of the causes, I think you did go over. But I think when we look really closely at the collapse, it was a time where people were fighting, like you were explaining, for position and power, but not so much in the sense of conquering. But I think that they saw that it was a need to survive at that time, because a lot of the natural resources were lackluster and things were very off tilt at that time in the region. So I think that would cause a lot of mayhem on top of the desire to rule in a way that has not been seen before to a degree, because during the Bronze Age collapse, you got to understand they were already using a lot of weaponry like chariots, horse and carriage during this time period to win and wage wars. So I don't think it was a lack or a misunderstanding of what the essentials and necessities and things that people need to thrive in a society. I think that with the constant back and forth between so many different groups of people, for an example, like the Sea people, they invaded to a degree. But we all know, for an example, the whole collapse, this was a time-consuming thing. It didn't happen all at once. It happened over a period of time. So I think in the midst of going through famine and lacking a lot of the basic needs, it brought forth a lot more chaos to the situation in which we see a lot of the people in that region, again, was fighting for power, because this is on the brink. This is happening on the brink of the Dark Ages for the Greeks. This is what perpetuated that for them. So, I mean, I would definitely say it was really out of most people's power. I think we also saw, like you were explaining, it was an opportunity for a lot of bigger regimes and bigger military might equipped nations of people at that time. So I would definitely say it was an attempt to utilize the times within inside of an economical system in a region, not just your particular zone, but a complete region. And that sent it to a collapse, because when resources are dire, you got to figure and make a way, and that's pretty much what you saw on multiple sides, because a lot of death occurred, a lot of scattering occurred, a lot of moving around occurred, on top of these bigger regimes with military might consuming a lot of things within their path as they see what's going on, because at that time. We know they were the ones that were really controlling the avenues
Mm-hmm.
in which economies were moving a lot like today. They had a lot of alliances, a lot of trading, because we can take it all the way back to Silk Road and see that these type of things were going on as far as in trade and regions from one side of the continent dealing with people from the other. So I think I wouldn't even say it was a lack. I think it was more so the powers that be outside of the control of the people in that region, because the land was doing something unseen, unheard of at that time. Nature was doing things that was unseen and unheard of at that time.
And see, this is why I feel like you're right. I feel like the Most High, yeah, they're gonna imagine different, like you said, wastes and stuff like that, but only the real Most High is gonna tell their people, hey, batten up at the hatches because we might have some real catastrophe here and people might not like it. I'm not
Right.
fake as fuck, and I'm not like fuck withable as fuck with people will make me, just because I don't believe that the Most High ever had an account where they were like, oh, God was like, oh shit, like we need to do this, we need to do that. Maybe I'm so wrong. Maybe I need to be humbled. But I'm asking my God to humble me,
Mm.
not other people, because I want to know the truth.
Right.
So, like, if my God humbles me, I really do apologize for that, brother and sisters, because I probably wasn't in check right. But give me another shot, because I guarantee I'm going to keep trying harder and harder. That's the type of stuff I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't get a chance in front of my brothers and sisters. I don't like that. So
Yep.
I feel like other people are going to ask regardless.
To stick that to the topic, sister, was so interesting, and Pitbull, you right on the money, Brody. But to get that to the topic, sister, one of the interesting things that I found was when it came to the conquering and the peace and who was doing what and the mind state of people, what you seen was from Mesopotamia mindset was conquering. They had a conqueror's mindset. But when you got to like the Nile Valley, even parts of Canaan, certain parts of Canaan, they didn't share this same conquership mindset. Like they understood you can be my sister from across the
Wait,
coast and
bro. Do
we
you know
can,
how important that is and how
yeah,
cool it is and how dope it is for our people to be like, well, you didn't give up on that one portion or whatever. Like, we have that for eternity. I'm not
yeah,
really sure if people get what we're saying here. Because what
yeah,
we're saying is we have that for eternity.
exactly.
Like, you may question sometimes along the way, and that's cool. We love you for that. We want you to question, because if we didn't question, we'd question ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So keep questioning. I love you through it. And sometimes it's going to be disappointing. I may even find myself disappointing. I may find myself like, damn. Oh, I'm embarrassed. Y'all got that already? Y'all understood that already? Okay, well, let's do a different route.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, we're always going to get it together. So let's try to make some kind of equilibrium. That's all I'm saying. I love y'all so much, but I'm just trying to say.
Most definitely, sister. Most definitely appreciate it. You know we love you too, sis. You know we always here. That's what it's for. My
I
space
feel
is your
like that's
space.
what
Be
all of us are
yourself.
for at this point.
Yeah.
Nick, if you need to make it up, tell me on the back end so that on Front Street we can make a look a good. Like, I know that is fucked up because none of us should be doing that. But I'm saying I'm open to availability to my brothers and sisters that we probably do think we would align, but it's just not that right moment. In this moment, I'm looking for y'all to represent what you represent and me to be like, dang, I'm so proud of them. I love it so much and I'm going to support it. That's where I'm at this moment. I'm not at the moment where I'm just like, well, tell you what you want to hear, tell you
Yeah,
are blue in the face. I'm sorry, I'm just not where. So if you're looking for a woman like that, we are not get along. What I'm saying is the people that have gotten along, I am very much in admiration for them, and I'm loving it, and I'm very grateful that I could have been anywhere near it. And I'm so proud of y'all, and I love you so much.
Yes, man. Look, this is what it's all about, sis. This right here is what it's all about, right? We show up to the table with our own beliefs, with our own thoughts. You know, we are all philosophers in our own way. We are trying to figure it the freak out. You feel me?
Right?
And so the best thing we can do at the end of the day is sit with each other and come to the table and say, well, look, sister, this is what I found out today. What you think about that?
Right.
Look, brother, this is what I found out
Sometimes,
today.
no
What you think
shade,
about
bro.
that? You
That
know what I'm
is my
saying?
secret weapon. Is that I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, look, that's what I came up with today. I don't have nothing else. But sis, if you got stuff, please. Because to me, this day sucks. And to
Right.
me, like, it is kind of a nice and a privilege for us to be like, hey, sis, this is.
Yeah.
Because it is. Like, not all of us have that, but it is very grateful when we do. That's why I ask my sisters when I can, look, is it crazy? Cause if you think it's crazy, it might be.
It just might be. Yeah.
It just might be.
But that's why you need people to, you know, I always tell my brother A1, like I'm just so grateful to have the people around me that I've
Right.
had.
No
I've been
shade.
just so grateful just to, like, even when I'm up here and I'm on other platforms, and like I always give y'all a shout out because y'all don't understand the pit bulls of the world, man. Y'all don't understand. Without sharpening myself with y'all
No,
every
Pitbull
day,
is right
I
here.
wouldn't
That's
have
our
the,
brother,
you know what I'm saying?
bro. Pitbull is right here. Do
Yeah,
you
you
know
right there, I
that's our
said,
brother?
but I wouldn't be able to be up here doing what I was able to, you know what I'm saying? Show
That's
off
what
what
I'm
I was
trying
able
to
to show
say.
off.
Like when I was and this is young cat before I met any of y'all. When I was up here young and didn't know what I was doing, I'd probably rely on any of y'all. Now I don't do that. Now I'm like,
Right.
well, my brother is talking about some stuff right now that Pip might not be talking. Like I separate y'all.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is not because I think y'all's better than another. It's because we got different things that are very important to us.
That's a fact.
And I just feel like I respect some of y'all in areas that are very important to me. And I hope that you guys won't like totally turn off to me just because some people are directly associated with me as far as my important beliefs. And some of those you can't change. Like, I'm always going to love mothers. I'm always going to love fathers. I'm always going to want to try to help when I can and y'all, and I'm not really gonna be able to change that if you say like, well, my baby mama needs help, but she ain't doing shit. Well, she sure looks like she's struggling right now, and I might help her.
There you go. There you
Don't
go.
be mad at me because I did that. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's the type of shit I'm talking about. Like this stuff I can't handle because I'm going to do the right thing.
Yep.
As according to me. It might not be the right thing to you.
There you go.
That's what I'm trying to tell people.
Finish him.
So we may have different.
It's morality, and this is a conversation I had like a week ago. Morality is subjective, right? I could be sitting. One thing Baltimore taught me: mind your own business.
No shade.
You could be sitting
People
on
don't
the
get while I was
watch this.
Grew
Listen
up
to
the
this.
way I grew up,
Yeah,
you would shut the fuck up too.
watch
This
this.
ain't nothing. I don't hate you.
Yep, yep. But watch this, sis. You could be sitting on a bus and a man and his woman could be getting into it. Now you could be a man who, I don't allow disrespect around women. You feel me? You ain't about to disrespect a woman in front of me. And they getting into it, he getting all loud, he get to choking her up, he get to putting his hands on her. Here you go, stand up, being a stand-up dude. Hey, yo, chill, man, get off the sister like that. They both turn around and bank the crap out you. You sit here like, yo, I'm trying to help. I'm trying to help
But
you
bro,
out,
I feel
sis.
like we all learn that when trying to
Yeah,
stand up for
mind your own
anybody.
business.
Like anybody. Like I used to be so lightweight like that, but like this ain't a game. People are living their lives out here.
Yeah.
And you can't just be like, well, my little opinion is this. Well, your little opinion may that, but it may be getting people into all kind of fights that are desperate marriage survivals or anything you don't understand.
She
And you
dealing
should
with a
probably
crazy
shut the
nigga and
fuck
you
up.
trying to help, and she get the wall and they get in the house.
Right. Like, what do you do in that moment?
That nigga trying to protect you on the bus.
Right.
I'm trying to save shorty. I just gotta beat up even worse. Like, so we gotta, what's right for us is not always was right for the situation. This is why assessment is always important. Read the room is a thing.
It's a huge thing, bro.
All the time. Read the room. Reading situations is a thing. You see what I'm saying?
What's up, Pitt? No, that's a huge thing. And I appreciate Pitt even saying, like, I didn't necessarily know that was the kind of environment you were going to be in before I said something. I said something when I said something. That's how I feel, too. I feel like, well, if I would have known.
Is that Sister Fawn on the panel? Shout out to my sister Fawn.
I don't see any. Oh, Rain. Yeah, that's Rain. That's
Shalom, sister.
What's up, bro? But bro, wouldn't you agree, like, if we would have known certain things, we wouldn't have moved certain ways years down the line, like yesteryear or whatever, the year before that, we probably would have protected our brother, but we didn't necessarily know what was going on either.
Facts.
And that's what I'm trying to get people. Like, if you don't know, you're just trying to react to what we know best,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's no shade of like I'm trying to be innocent
know what
or
you
nothing.
know. You don't know nothing else. See, it's a thing, right? I know I'm intelligent because I know nothing at all. But in that statement is the secret. I only know what I know. I don't know nothing else. You see what I'm saying? So if I'm sitting in a room surrounded by four walls and all I know is what goes on within these four walls, I can't help my brother down the street going through something.
No, I always see in you trying to help us in whatever situation. That's why I keep coming back in a situation where I'm eligible to you, but I'm not necessarily wrong because I know I'm not wrong. But I also know that if I'm close to you in proximity, I could be blamed for being wrong. So what I do say is I am supportive of this person. And if people attack me later, I kind of know why. And I sit with that because at this point in my life, I kind of sit with if I speak on business when I know there's other business. Let's put it that way. Right. So now I'm at a point too where I love you both. And if anything goes wrong in the midst of it, you could call me in between because I'm going to say what needs to be said in front of other people, or I'll just shut the fuck up and love you both in quiet. But you know how I feel.
Oh, yeah. And you know what was interesting about that? And I've been saying this for the past weeks as well. When we get up here, we speak out information. You know what I'm saying? We put information online. Man, this is a sport. You see what I'm saying? Of course, we got the over fandoms who's gonna, I rock with this person, this person only. But for the sensible people out there, we family, man. You see what I'm saying? I always tell people all the time, I see Capone, he be over on the panels. I say, listen, man, me and Capone bump heads all day long, man. I said, but that's my brother from another mother. Same with my brother Pitbull, same with Chosen. You see what I'm saying? Like, yo, I look at y'all like, fam, yeah, we bump heads and we come.
Wait, but bro, like you said something that's really important to me, and it's the reason why I don't care if I hear you been in for 40 minutes. I'll come in. I'll just check you. You might not even know why I'm coming in. I'm coming in to make sure you're good, and if things aren't good, I'm gonna end shit. Gonna call the boss, ignore shit. He will know that by the fact that I'm saying something,
Right.
that something is wrong. And that's what I love about fire, is that if any of us, I don't care if it's Lady Shay, I don't care if it's Shine, I don't care if it's me, if any of us call him and tell him something ain't right, we're gonna sit there until we do get it right or get it wrong with someone else. But the point is, we know something ain't right. And what I mean by something ain't right is questioning somebody's integrity.
Right.
If you know you don't respect that person, you don't like that person, nobody does, they don't need to be on the panel.
That's a fact.
And otherwise, let's hear what they have to say, because this sister or brother might have something to point to our next direction. And that's just how I feel. Like, we should all trust each other. And then if we feel like, if somebody we respect gives us a perspective that's different, even if it's our own difference, we should probably listen.
Hold on
And
one
other
second.
than that, I love y'all.
Most definitely. Give me 1 second, y'all.
And this has been another great episode of the Ring of Fire Humble Mystic presentation on the Bronze Age collapse. We want to thank everybody that tuned in and watched, like, shared, and subscribed to the channel, and those who brought their questions to challenge the heat. We'll see you next time with the fire, the heat, and the smoke. Thanks for tuning in, folks. It's been great.